We're back with the third episode of the Voidlight Sci-Fi podcast, where we deep dive into the science fiction genre and try to find why it's so important as a dialogue for humanity. In this episode, we're talking about cyberpunk and the simulation. I'm Anthony,
I'm Kostas. And
and
also Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, guys! I know it's been a tough year. It's been a fun year. It's been all kinds of things. But 2019's
It's,
here.
it's been it's been a simulation, actually.
The simulation. Sure, definitely glitch in the
Yeah,
making here.
yeah, that's right. Okay,
But
so the theme, the subject is cyberpunk and simulation. What about it? What was your last read, the last book that you read
the last
about
book,
cyberpunk?
the, the well, I read two. I've been reading Chasm
I
City
know.
by Alistair Reynolds,
Great.
and I've been reading Neuromancer by William Gibson. Now, for those who know what cyberpunk is, Neuromancer is like the Bible for cyberpunk. Although it did come after Blade Runner, it's been referred to as having a lot of more of the substantial staples of what cyberpunk is. And I think we should explain for fans who aren't sure exactly what cyberpunk is, what it is. So it's a subgenre of sci-fi, but it's touted as a high-tech, low-life kind of society where a lot of the power structure is built on incorporating and abusing, the technologies that the low life kind of feeds off of.
Yeah, it also have many similarities with noir. You also call it space noir sometimes.
Yeah, actually, a good quote by William Gibson, the writer of Neuromancer. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, and that speaks volumes about what cyberpunk is at its core. Is it's really encompassing the ideas of big tech conglomerates. I'm not really talking about Facebook in this case. I'm not talking about things like Google, but imagine Google if it was 200 years in the future. With where our technology is going with quantum computing, with where our technology is going with AI. Now, put that in the context of a society that has been a dystopian society that has been repressed and that can't really get their hands on a lot of this amazing tech, and it's not being used for the amazing things that it's created for, essentially.
Yeah, it's the human drama actually. The fact that we build big cities, we want to innovate, but at the end, what happens is that we get out of the jungle. We are more advanced, but we created another jungle. That's something that Will Eisner used to say about the cities, and that's human nature because we're not gods. We have problems. It's not easy to go closer to perfection, even if the technology is getting closer and closer. Humankind, it's very difficult to find ourselves, and we always feel half of what we can be, most of us. So that's why I really love noir films, and I'm a big fan of cyberpunk, and I can see the similarity. They're very, very close to each other, those genres.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Things like the noir genre, which I don't think cyberpunk would be cyberpunk without the genre that came before. That was noir. Uh,
Yeah,
Noir was really born of the existential tone that cyberpunk has. but it's also, like you were saying, it's really rooted in the deep problems of humanity. So you have your hard-boiled hero. In this case, since we're talking about specifically noir, we'll say someone like Philip Marlowe. I could be wrong, but from the Maltese Falcon, I believe. Um, and he's going around, and he has this just dreary look on life. Everybody is an enemy. Everybody is someone who will betray you, who will who has human flaws, but those flaws are extremely exemplified um, in this noir setting. And so people like Ridley Scott, people like I would say even Moebius, um, with The Long Tomorrow, he he could take that kind of essentially shitty aspect of the human
Yeah.
race, our ability to kind of flounder in the mud, and take that farther beyond the dull gray aesthetic that is noir.
Yeah. That's truth. To me, good science fiction story, it's a monologue for the human race. Uh, and the difference between noir and cyberpunk is that most of cyberpunk stories they're kind of crime. That's the similarities, but the difference is that it's still a monologue for the human race. For example, we're going to talk about Blade Runner, as in every episode.
Yeah,
And you have a crime story, a situation really noir, etc. But you have the monologue about the humankind and the questions from a replica, uh, from a robotic synthetic being.
yeah,
So those things are very clear. And when you have a clear message into a movie or a story, yeah, things it's very easy to get the message from movies like Blade Runner. Also, in Long Tomorrow, it's very easy to get the message. It's something like less than 20 pages, and you get the message about politics, about the low life detective, about robots, aliens, everything.
yeah. I completely agree. And before we get too far in diving into some great examples of the cyberpunk genre, it's important to say that the cyberpunk genre in itself isn't just a genre. It represents a larger cultural awareness of things like oppressive conglomerates, of things like, a dystopian social structure caused by these things. Um, Transhumanism is a very big thing with cyberpunk. So most of these technologies that are coming out of these companies, whether it be the Tyrell Corporation or the technologies of Night City, of Neuromancer, these things are changing fundamentally, or they're supposed to change fundamentally, what the human existence is. But a large part of what the noir side, I would say, of the cyberpunk genre is to examine a world where transhumanism exists, but the raw humanity is able to persevere, and in some cases not able to persevere through that haze of technology, through
Yeah,
that of what could essentially kind of drown out human nature.
the raw humanity. It goes back to noir. Noir started with the first noir movie. It was the Struggler from the first. I don't remember the floor. It was a black and white, of course, movie, and noir started when you have, for those that they have seen that movie, the noir aspect started when the American crew and director start to mimic the German expressionists cinema. So the raw humanity uh, came with the crime story from the American perspective,
Yeah.
and the theatrical weird way of expressing, what it's inside us. So
Yeah.
actually, it happens in a dream sequence when the protagonist thinks that he's going to get in charge for a murder that he did not commit, and start watching weird things involving like a dream state. So that's the German expressionism from cinema,
Yeah.
which goes very close to who we are. Expressionism always goes very close to who we are and what we want to say,
Yeah.
adding the crime stories which the American audience always loved in comic books, movies, etc., books. So you have that amalgam of two things, and it's really it's the evolution. Cyberpunk to me is the evolution of the noir, and also adding the technology and the monologue about the humankind, what is wrong with us, or what it's not.
Yeah.
So it's also the third amalgam, the third element to that whole aspect. It's actually a journey of the human thought to understand through technology, through expression, and through crime stories, because we love looking at guns shooting people. you know,
Yeah.
it's the same thing when we were in arenas and we were doing that thing. Yeah, we love that.
I think
uh,
the
and
unfair.
murder and death. Also, you have in noir, you have the female fatale and love and betrayal. Betrayal
Oh,
is a big part, and also the betrayal in cyberpunk. The betrayal can be the betrayal from the humankind to robots, because the female fatale can be the humankind to some, or some people to others. It's amazing because you have so many themes. It's very close to ancient theater. It's very close to many things that we're trying to create through storytelling as a race. Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think cyberpunk would be cyberpunk or anything for that matter without the human soul, without the human element. And as a like I was saying, I think it would be unfair to attribute cyberpunk to just like Blade Runner and Neuromancer and like the noir films. Because as I think back, Fritz Lang's Metropolis, I would
Yeah.
say, was the first great example of cyberpunk. You
Yeah.
have dystopian society. I might not remember this right. It's been a long time. It was a silent movie, um, but you have a dystopian society in which the workers are oppressed, and it's somewhere along that narrative. You have a woman who sort of I don't know, I don't remember if it's against her will or choosing, or she chooses to, but she transcends into sort of an icon of everything that they dislike, everything that those companies, those oppressive empirical structures stand for, and transcends the human state to become this robot, this synthoid,
Yeah.
synthetic, essentially. Um, and so as we explore this, it's I think the roots, like you said, with ancient theater and stuff like that, the roots can stretch infinitely far back. But
Yeah.
it's the smallest things that really exemplified our soul, our the things that made us human. Because going back to something like Blade Runner, though it wasn't intended, Roy Batty as the villain, he was the shining character of that movie. And it was because of that last moment. He spends the whole movie chasing Deckard, essentially, or trying to avoid, playing a cat and mouse game that's really present in noir. But at the very last moment, when he can choose to take the life of Rick Deckard, he chooses to express what his own life means to him and what Deckard's freedom means as a larger allegory of the human race and the replicants, how they feel.
Yeah, that's true. Also, you hit the point that I never thought before, that Metropolis, it's maybe the first cyberpunk movie. You're right. I also some months ago I hear from a speaker uh, on a convention that Metropolis is the ultimate dystopian and utopia movie. So it's archetypical. Uh, it's uh, it's when everything actually started, and you're right. So about cyberpunk, when a movie or a book or a comic book, it's not cyberpunk. I want to bring the example of Mute. Uh,
Yeah.
Mute, it's from an amazing director. It's not his best movie. So sorry, I don't remember the name. He also did the Moon and other amazing movies. So Mute, that movie, it's like you don't have a reason to have all that cyberpunk environment.
Yeah.
For no reason, we were seeing a Berlin of 2000 and I don't know 100. I cannot even remember, and all that for a reason just to have the protagonist getting back his voice.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. It's like so up that okay, we can do all those CGI stuff. The worst example. It's not a bad movie, but the worst example, of course, it's the reboot of Total Recall. It's like we agree on that. We hated both. We see Cyberpunk for no reason.
Yeah.
Uh, it's really bad, actually. Going back to Mute, you have to have those elements. They have to be a part of the story. No matter if you have to feel that if we're in a cyberpunk environment and we're having a story and we're following that protagonist, if the camera goes to somebody else, we're going to have another cyberpunk story.
Yeah.
Someone else in the street. It's like that's happened in that city. Everybody has its own misery and his own bad origin story and story. So no matter who we follow, we're going to have an amazing film or book or story, cyberpunk,
That's a
style.
that's a great point.
Yeah. Sorry. Last thing, in Blade Runner, you have that thing. You think that all those people around him, they are an entire movie about their life
Absolutely. Yeah.
and the
Like
struggle.
even the replicants, like remove Deckard, remove the Tyrell Corporation. Well, I mean you can't really, but
Yeah.
take the replicants, Roy Batty and Leon and Pris, take them back to where they started, where they're just slaves, working for the colonies out there. Each one of them, with those things, they are embodying their own journeys. Because cyberpunk embodies the human soul. It really it could be anybody's story.
Yeah.
And in saying that, it's not anybody's story. It's everybody's story. It's the story of how humanity as a whole progresses through the transcendence of their species. And so it's interesting to compare something like Total Recall, you said, to something like Ghost in a Shell.
Yeah.
So you have those genre conventions where you have high tech and low life. You have that in Ghost in a Shell. You have the military who are completely weaponized. They're ready to go. They're like a police state of their own. And then you have the seedy underbelly, who is a lot of the hacker stuff, a lot of the bad black market stuff usually
Yeah.
tends to fall within that. But then you have something like Total Recall or Tron, where you have those interesting elements of cyberspace. You have the Matrix, but you don't have the contrast. You have nothing to contrast it against.
Yeah.
That's where you have the seedy underbelly, where you have humans struggling. And that kind of brings me to a point I've always kind of been stuck on, especially in my writing of Sub Zenith, is can we effectively break the cyberpunk conventions without while still telling a story that is intrinsically cyberpunk? So can we escape the drab, dreary, dark setting that we see in everything, from Blade Runner, from Ghost in a Shell, from Akira, and get out to something like Cyberpunk during the day? Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
seen yet. Like,
Well, there've been movies about zombies in the day, so if you can pull that out, I think Romero did one of those, one or two. So yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a good point. That's a great point. Yes, you can do that because misery. If you go to and struggle, it's like daylight, night doesn't care. So yes, that could be great, but it's very difficult. Very
what
difficult.
what would you say would be the most difficult about it? Like to take something like, if you could put your own spin on Blade Runner, if you could try to tell the same story about replicants who are essentially slaves of humanity,
Yeah.
basically coming up to say, "Hey,
You,
I am also human." What kind? If you could set that in another setting, how would you tell that story?
yeah, I think that you have to go with utopia. You have to be to the story of the colony. Uh, the things could look really utopian, and the workers, the replicants, you can see the struggle that they have every day, and also you can see the people of the higher society, the humans, that maybe they're living like gods. It's not exactly the Blade Runner story, but it's the idea of the colony in another area and the slaves. So maybe it's that story. You know, you have the great kingdom and the slaves underneath it. Maybe it's that thing, and then you can have the daylight and the more, and the contrast. It can be how weird things are. In a way, maybe there is that kind of movie exists. I'm not sure. I'm going to say it. 1984,
Yeah,
the movie, not the black and white, the second one. It's in the daylight. It's not too dark, but you see the utopia. You see all those things, and you don't see you don't see the cyberpunk element. In my mind, it's something like 1984, but with more technological advancement in the whole situation.
yeah. I think 1984 is a good place to kind of look at, because that is, again, I would say I would consider 1984 cyberpunk, but not for the big
It's
flashy.
it's not completely a cyberpunk. That's the problem. It's not 100% because you don't have the mechanical stuff. You don't have the advanced technology. You have the videos on the wall, etc. And you only have the video. That's
Yeah.
it. It's not the big screens.
Well,
Uh,
and in saying that, you are right in that aspect, but what cyberpunk embodies is that use of tech, and in this case, I think it can be anything related to technological advance, but it's using that tool that elite has to oppress
yes, you're
the
right
world.
about that.
And I
Yeah,
think that's a big part of 1984 is like, or 1982, 1984.
1984.
They're using that surveillance to oppress those who are being surveyed.
Yeah,
And it's interesting to think about. So as our technology advances, like I said, we're going into quantum. We're a new age of quantum computing. Uh, we're going into a new age of AI. We're going to get to a point where we are going to be able to simulate our universe down to
yeah,
the
you're right.
smallest particle.
Yeah.
down to the Planck length. Is that going to be morally controversial? So, to say if we were to run an exact simulation of our universe right now, with all the problems we have in the world, with all the problems we have on the small blue dot that is Earth, is that controversial? Is that immoral to subjects of a simulation to the same treatment that we are experiencing?
Well, morality involves with humans and also saints. For example, if people from 100 years ago see what we are doing with our privacy, or not one, like 50 years ago, see what we are doing with our
George Orwell,
privacy,
yeah.
yeah, they are going to be kind of bug, you know. I remember a story of a prisoner. He get out of jail after 30 years. He was working in New York, and the first thing that struck him it was the fact that everybody looked like a spy with the headphones and the
Oh
cell
wow.
phones, and he was like, "Oh, everybody just getting hired from CIA." He
Yeah.
didn't know. Yeah.
And that's
So
crazy. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, this the simulation it's kind of already existing, pre-existing in our cell phones, in the internet. And the question is how big the internet is going to become and how advanced with AI, etc.
Yeah. And that's a really important thing. Like I we don't know if we live in a simulation now. The
Yeah,
numbers tell us it's more likely that we live in a simulation than our base universe,
yeah.
which is mind blowing. But does it make a difference? If we were to be living in a simulation where, God created, the source code that we're running on, the fact that we can't tell the difference, does it change anything? Would it make you live differently if you know you were living in a simulation?
I have an example. Of course, you hear about that maybe in documentaries and books. The stories from people that they have a near-death experience. I'm not talking about the woo-woo, they see the light, etc. People that they have a near-death experience. After that, they change their life,
Yeah.
and also mythologically, Lazarus, he never smiled after coming back from hell.
Yeah.
You know, so if you know the more pieces of the truth, you will change everything. But the difficult thing and the task that we have is to find the truth without knowing so many things about it,
Yeah.
with only having some pieces. I once had an amazing dream when I was like 18 years old, 19 years old, that I was waking up, I was an alien, and
Wow.
I was playing a video game that called Human Life, and I was with some other friends, and they pat me in the back, and they were like, "How was it? Oh man, it was amazing! I was like 90 years old, and I did all those things, and no matter the pain, it was amazing, man. It was great." And then I wake up.
That's insane. Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's interesting to think about that. Like,
Sorry, I want to expand in that stupid dream. What if everything is, like a video game for children in another planet, and you wake up, I wake up, and it's like 1 minute. It's like a DMT trip, for years, but it's only 5 minutes,
time
10
dilation.
minutes. And if you know that everything is fake and they don't matter because this matter does not matter, then the perspective can change so drastically that you don't care. Now you care because you don't know. But if you know the truth, that truth, if the simulation exists, then you will not care. You will
Well,
care about something else.
one thing I gotta say is the numbers, the math that's done by scientists, by physicists in the universe, we know that everything down to that sip of coffee you just took was predetermined. You were going to take that coffee.
Yeah, yeah, fate.
But something. The reason why Cyberpunk is so amazing at expressing what makes us human is it's that subjective side. It's the side that lets us think. It's the side that lets us have emotion. That really it keeps us from always thinking about the fact that everything I do is predetermined. I don't have free will. We don't have free will. But in our minds, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter truly. We fight through it somehow.
Yeah, what is free will? I don't. It's not easy to explain free will because okay, humans they are like worms of time. They can live only the now.
Yeah,
So to beings that they don't live time, they don't see. They can see actually the present and the past. To them, we are not having free will, but what we have is the sense of time, and that's not the free will, but it's a perspective.
yeah.
So yeah, maybe we don't have a free will, but I think it's comparison to beings that they don't achieve the time consuming elements that we have. Cannot explain. Sorry, the English barrier. Yeah,
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. As human beings, as beings probably anywhere in the universe, I'm just broadly speaking, we are confined to the mortal boundaries of time, and that leads us through our world line of events until we die, and we don't know what death is. Death could easily be becoming the butterfly after being in the chrysalis that is the caterpillar.
yeah.
Um, but until we are able to confirm or explore these things deeply, we'll never know. And I think that is huge. I think that's huge in terms of being human, being a part of the human race. Is we don't know all the answers. We probably will never know all the answers,
Yeah,
but
that's
we.
that's the whole point. Sorry, the fact that we don't know all the answers, it's the same thing that we cannot see our past and our present and our future at the same time.
Yeah,
It's the reason why we cannot see that truth. It's because we are in that tunnel of time, and we cannot go outside on the other dimension and see the tunnel. We are inside of it.
yeah. So
It's
to leave us with a fact, kind of a mind blowing fact here before we start to close is because of time dilation, because of the way the universe has expanded. If we were to travel along a straight line at the speed of light, and we were to arrive at a planet, our Earth that we left from would not be the same Earth. Now,
yeah,
we kind of know this. We already know that, a time is passing, and when we return, we will likely return in the future or in the far past. But that speaks to something bigger, is that our past, our present, and our future are just illusions to us. The
yeah.
dinosaurs still exist. The Neanderthals, they still exist. If you traveled far out there, they'd still exist behind you.
Yep.
Still an Earth where our whole civilization is just now starting to skyrocket. And I
Yeah.
think that is a fascinating thing to grasp as a small little ape man on this planet.
Yeah, we are going to have a free will, and now I'm going to announce the next subject of our next podcast: time travel.
Yeah,
We're going to have that power of free will when we go back in time and change things. Einstein said that when you change the past, also you change the future and everything and the timeline.
yeah,
Some scientists believe in that, some others don't, and maybe that's free will when we can go back and forth through time. Maybe we're living in a simulation that our ancestors, our ancestors created, going back to time and maybe fixing the Second World War so we're not destroying Earth. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great. That's great. I'm excited to explore that
yeah.
topic. So
We're having 5 minutes. So something else that you want to say about first Cyberpunk and then simulation, so we can close the this
yeah,
podcast.
so I think going kind of in reverse there, uh, the simulation and what we've just talked about, and not really knowing all the answers, really embodies what cyberpunk's all about. And like we said, it's cyberpunk is an amalgam of all these
Yeah,
issues that are truly and deeply rooted in our human nature, from technology, from the pursuit of power, from low seediness, from black markets, to just everything in cyberpunk screams, I am human.
yeah.
I think that's it's a really big part to be human, to want.
Also screams what it's like to be human, because also the robots, they are
Yeah,
they're in
the
the story.
robots are like, hey, humanity's not just yours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So about Voidlight and Sub-Zenith, where do you see Sub-Zenith going with simulation and in 4 minutes and Cyberpunk?
okay, Sub Zenith, simulation, cyberpunk. So Sub Zenith is actually, like I said, trying to break out of the conventions of
Yeah,
cyberpunk. Sub Zenith is my attempt. Sub Zenith is set in a small, big universe. It's set within our universe, but it's set inside of like a server, a whole different universe called the Slip Space, where you have the oppressed, of a place called the Indosphere, which is basically pumping out all of these realms, all of these digital virtual colonies, these little worlds, and each one is a separate simulation, a part of a bigger network of transhumans. And so you have that slavery, you have that deep, seedy humanness, but you also have that exploration into what isn't just what isn't just the conventions of cyberpunk. We dive straight into hard fantasy, but that is
yeah,
part of a larger network that shows us that that oppression isn't just in the dark cities. It's in across the vast country plains. It's in the weird forests. And so what I'm really trying to do with Sub Zenith is just really get out of my comfort zone, but really try my best to break the shackles of what some of these genres are. And cyberpunk won't be the only one, but right now this has been the most fun. So Sub Zenith is rounding on its sixth part. Um, you can find the first part on r/Voidlight Sci-Fi. We now have a Reddit, so this will be a place for our community to kind of talk, mingle, deeply explore these ideas that we love. Um, and so we're kind of want to leave you with one last question, and that's do you think we live in a simulation? And why do you think we live in a simulation? Does it matter to you? Um, so you can post an r/Voidlight Sci-Fi under the tag Voidlight Dialogue, or you can find questions we'll have there
that's
and
great.
interact with us. Tell us. It could be about anything we've talked about. It can be about anything else that's sci-fi. Let us know. Communicate with us. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, thank you for being here with us. It was another Voidlight sci-fi podcast. And no matter what, if we're living in a simulation or not, we're getting closer and closer to the cyberpunk world, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, man.
So see you. Yeah, yeah. See you guys in the next one. Bye bye.